Hello, everybody. Welcome back to We're Talking Movies. As always, I'm Andrew, joined by Cade. And today we're doing our year-end awards for 2024. Now, admittedly, we were actually supposed to record this a while ago, and then I got knocked flat with one of the worst colds I've ever had. So we're here now. And let's just get straight on into it, shall we, Cade? What is your third favorite movie of the year?
Coming in at number three for me is going to be The Substance. I'll admit that I wasn't super sold on this movie when I first saw the trailers. I just kind of thought, maybe. But then I heard from a lot of people how good it was, so I decided to finally check it out. And I got to tell you, I was really impressed. I really enjoyed the concept of this movie, along with all the creativity that it had, especially when it came to the substance and how that works, and seeing the switch between the older and younger versions. I really enjoyed all the themes that the movie explored, such as the fear of getting older and the desire to be young again. I thought the performances were all great. Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley both gave such fantastic performances, in my opinion. Dennis Quaid, I think, also gave a pretty good performance. I also really enjoyed the cinematography and especially the sound design. And if those are two things that you can do really well, especially in a horror film, then it's one way to keep me invested. I really enjoyed how it didn't rely solely on jump scares, because that's always one of my biggest issues with horror in general, is the reliance on jump scares every couple of minutes. But that's not the case with this movie. In fact, I would argue that this movie is more disturbing than it is scary. And I love that because it still kept me hooked into the plot and it was unsettling in a different way than what I'm typically used to in horror films. So yeah, I thought this movie was really great and it's definitely good enough to make my top three.
Very nice choice, Cade. A very worthy addition. Now, moving over to me in my number three position, we have Conclave. Now, this was a movie I had not heard about until the first trailer got released, but my goodness, that first trailer hooked me in good. This is a beautiful film. I love its use of contrasting colors, featuring dark blacks and bright and vibrant reds in contrast with these very almost sterile whites and grays in the background. There's also some gorgeous cinematography in this movie. For me, my favorite scene is the scene where all the cardinals are walking into the conclave for the day in the rain with their umbrellas passing under the camera, but that's just one of many very well shot scenes. The acting across the board is phenomenal in this movie. Ray Fiennes, especially as Cardinal Lawrence, a man who's already under the immense burden of leading what's seen as one of the most secretive and important processes in the world, especially in the Catholic Church. Throw the fact that he's now in charge of having to unravel these series of mysteries about some of the other frontrunner cardinals during the conclave makes for a very well thought out mystery that takes a lot of twists and turns throughout it. Some additional great performances from the likes of Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Lucien Massamati, and Isabella Rossellini, and then one hell of a final twist at the end, and you have a very well made movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. And that's coming from somebody who's maybe not a huge fan of movies' religious backgrounds to them.
Yeah, I get it. Well, coming in at number two for me is going to be Juror number two. So I'm actually not the biggest fan of legal films. There are some that I do enjoy. Like I really enjoyed Primal Fear, and I thought Lincoln Lawyer was also good. With this movie, when I heard about it, it sounded interesting, but I wasn't really desperate to see it. However, when I heard that it was being rumored to be Clint Eastwood's last movie, that immediately had me more interested to see it because I've always enjoyed a lot of Clint Eastwood's movies as a director. Unforgiven is one that I've always liked. Million Dollar Baby, I think, is such a great film. And overall, I think that he does a pretty good job with this movie, especially at the age of 94. I really enjoyed the premise, how we follow Justin Kemp when he becomes a member of the jury in a murder trial, and the revelation that he might actually be the one who's responsible for what happened to the victim. I really enjoyed seeing him work with the other jurors to try to give the suspect a fair trial while trying to see him evade exposure. Nicholas Hoult, I think, gave a really great lead performance. You know that he may be guilty, but you still feel some sympathy for him because he's not a bad person. And I think he captures that really well with his performance. He just made a mistake and he clearly feels guilty for it. And I also think Toni Collette's performance was great in this movie. And despite the fact that they're not in this movie that much, I really enjoyed J.K. Simmons and Kiefer Sutherland. I always enjoy seeing them in any movie or show, so that was good to see. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie a lot more than I thought I would. And if it is Clint Eastwood's last film, I think it's a really solid film to wrap everything up on.
Very, very nice. Admittedly, I've actually not had a chance to see it yet. It's on the backlog, but now we're moving on to my second favorite movie of 2024. Yes, my second favorite movie of 2024 is Nosferatu, directed by Robert Eggers. Just wow, what a phenomenal movie this was. Robert Eggers is very quickly becoming one of my favorite directors working today, and this movie may have truly cemented that for me. First off, acting across the board is phenomenal. I loved Lily Rose Depp as the cursed and tormented Ellen Hutter, a woman who also realizes that she's kind of the one who has to make the sacrifice to save everybody around her. Much like how you just discussed Nicholas Hoult in Juror number two, he was also very good in this movie as the almost woefully naive and yet still completely terrified Thomas Hutter. You've also got Simon McBurney as the vicious and utterly mad cohort of Count Orlok, Mr. Knock. However, there's two performances that stand head and shoulders above the rest for me. Number one being Willem Dafoe as Professor von Franz, this scene-stealing professor of the supernatural. And then, of course, you've got the absolute stunner of a performance by Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok. He does a great job portraying this dark entity as something that is very, very old, very, very angry, and very, very evil. I also just need to also give a plum to his very deep, almost watery voice he gives. Apparently, Bill Skarsgård actually trained with several opera singers, learning how to drop his voice a full octave, which gives him that very low sounding voice. Combine that with some excellent cinematography, which again, Robert Eggers is very good at producing. If you've seen any of his movies, very good makeup and costume work. And then Robert Eggers' signature use of natural light sources to create this very gorgeous and yet still very eerie gothic horror movie. Very, very well made film. I'm very excited to see what he does next.
Yeah, for sure. All right, now coming in at number one, my number one movie of the year is Dune Part 2. So I did enjoy the first Dune by Denis Villeneuve, and I was hoping that part two would be a good payoff to everything that was set up in the first one. And guess what? Not only was it good, it was great. And I've seen most of Denis Villeneuve's films, Prisoners, Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, but I think that this might be his best movie yet, honestly. He and the creative team did such a great job with this movie. I enjoyed the plot of this movie more than I did the first one. I really liked Paul's journey from becoming a reluctant leader into more of a tragic anti-hero. I thought the cinematography in this movie was flawless. Greg Fraser is probably becoming one of my favorite cinematographers today, alongside people like Roger Deakins. But apart from that, the sound design was so incredible. It really made you feel as if you were experiencing this living, breathing reality. And I always enjoy feeling that immersed in a film. And apart from that, the action in this movie is also fantastic. The CGI, the makeup, the costume design, the color palette. I was just blown away by pretty much every aspect of this movie. I also want to highlight all the performances. Timothée Chalamet does a great job. Zendaya is great. I also really liked her dynamic with Chalamet. Austin Butler gave such a fantastic villain performance. The cast of this movie in general is just amazing. I mean, they got Christopher Walken, Josh Brolin, Rebecca Ferguson, Florence Pugh, Javier Bardem, Dave Bautista, Léa Seydoux. Even Anya Taylor-Joy makes a brief appearance in this movie. So many actors that I really like in one movie. I mean, what more could I ask for, right? So yeah, it was definitely my favorite movie of the year, and I'm looking forward to seeing Dune Messiah when that movie eventually comes out. So yeah, it definitely is my favorite movie of the year.
A very worthy choice. Now, moving over back over to me, my number one for the second year in a row, weirdly enough, my favorite movie of 2024 is an animated movie. For my favorite movie of 2024, we have to talk about The Wild Robot. And unlike last year, where my favorite movie was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, this animated movie completely came out of left field for me. However, I love, love this movie so much. First and foremost, the animation is amazing. It gives this kind of almost shell-shaded look combined with watercolor. It's just gorgeous to look at. There's scenes that look like paintings in this movie. Second off, the voice cast in this movie is phenomenal. The likes of Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal, Kit Connor, and Bill Nighy are great, giving characters like Roz the robot, Fizz the fox, Bright Bill, and Hill and Longneck the geese. They give them so much warmth and charm, and they've got great dynamics with each other, which especially is what sells it. Roz and Bright Bill is this found mother-son dynamic. Fizz is this kind of starts off as a scoundrel fox, but ends up growing a heart, deeply loves his newfound family. I love the theme of found family throughout the course of this movie. I love how it also deals with ideas of destiny and overcoming your odds and sacrificing yourself for those you care about. It's also got some really genuinely emotional moments in it. For me, what comes to mind is Roz admitting to have accidentally killed Bright Bill's real mother, Longneck sacrificing himself to protect the rest of his flock when they get stranded in the human biofarm they get trapped in. Roz deciding to return to her creators willingly in order to protect the various friends she's made on the island, and of course that frankly tear-inducing reunion between Roz and Bright Bill at the end of the movie, where Roz kind of breaks through her programming again and remembers Bright Bill. This is a movie that's going to make you laugh and it's going to make you cry. And another thing is, I will always respect a family movie for dealing with more mature themes and having more mature moments in it. In my opinion, this will go down as this generation's Iron Giant. And if I was director Chris Sanders, I would be clearing a spot on my bookshelf because there may very well be an Oscar sitting on it in the not too distant future. I feel like it's either this or Flow, which was also a very good movie. But, definitely a phenomenal movie. Probably the best movie DreamWorks has made in a very long time. I just really, really loved this movie to the point that I've actually bought it on DVD. And I haven't bought a DVD in years. All right, so now that we have concluded each of our top three favorite movies of the year awards, we have our other three awards we have to give out. And we're starting off with what we dubbed last year the Make You Feel Like a Kid Again award, which is your most fun at the cinema award. So, Cade, what was your most fun at the cinema this year?
Most fun at the cinema this year for me was Kung Fu Panda 4. Now, I didn't necessarily love this movie, I'll admit that, but it was a fun experience seeing it in the theater. And I've always been a fan of the original Kung Fu Panda. The second and third movies I think are both good. And overall, I thought that this was a decent entry in the franchise. I really liked Poe's arc of training a successor to become the next Dragon Warrior. I really enjoyed his dynamic with Zen and the journey that they go on together throughout the film. I also did enjoy James Hong and Bryan Cranston's chemistry as Poe's fathers. I thought that was a lot of fun to see. Viola Davis, I think, gave a really good villain performance as the Chameleon. I think it was also really cool to see Ian McShane return as Tai Lung. That really brought back memories of the first one, so that was fun to see. And yeah, definitely the most fun that I had at the theater, and it was definitely a very entertaining experience. Again, not one of my favorite movies of the year, but still a really good watch. So that will make my most fun at the theater this year.
So for me, I thought this category was crowded last year, meaning 2023, but this year it was even more crowded because at one point there was six different movies fighting over this slot. So I have a couple of quick honorable mentions I need to give. Deadpool Wolverine, Bad Boys Ride or Die, Beetlejuice, and Sonic the Hedgehog 3. But in the end, one movie stands above the rest as my most fun at the cinema award, and that has to be Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, one of my most anticipated for 2024, and the only one on my list that actually A, came out, and B, actually I really liked. The MonsterVerse continues to show it has some brilliant special effects, and this movie in particular I think really showcased that with the likes of Scar King and Shimo, some of the stuff they did in this movie, the fact that they managed to feature more Kongs on screen at the same time. Great special effects, a lot of big dumb monster fights, which is exactly what you want in this movie. Godzilla and Kong obviously squaring off again, and you got Scar King and Shimo, and then you also got Mothra as a fun return to the MonsterVerse after being absent for a couple of movies. I love the father-son dynamic between Kong and Zuko, or as the internet has dubbed him, Mini Kong. I like how they kind of start off as enemies and then sort of grow attached to each other. I think Trappers, a really fun scenery-chewing comedy character, and that's coming from a series that's known for not having great human characters. I also think his bromance with Bernie Hayes is hilarious. Does a good job just really being big, dumb fun, and it also leaves a lot open about what the next chapter of the MonsterVerse holds, because at the end of this movie, Godzilla is powered up to his pink ray form. Kong not only has a new weapon in the Beast Glove, but he's also got basically this kind of army behind him now with the former imprisoned Kongs that were under Scar King's rule. He's got Zuko and Shimo now in his back pocket, so it kind of wonders, where does the MonsterVerse go from here? Because they've already confirmed that the third movie is coming out in 2027, I believe. Yeah, I'm not sure who the villain for that be. I don't know if they're going to bring in Destroya, or if they're going to do Space Godzilla, or Robo Ghidorah, or bringing in Gamera. But yeah, just a really fun movie that came out at the perfect time for me, and the fact that I actually saw it twice in theaters. So that concludes our Make You Feel Like a Kid Again awards. Now we're moving on to the Phantom Menace Award for the most disappointing movie of the year 2024. Cade, what was your most disappointing movie of last year?
My most disappointing movie of 2024 is The Bike Riders. So I was very interested in this movie just based off the trailers that I'd seen for it. It seemed like it had a really interesting premise, and I liked all the actors in it. Tom Hardy, Austin Butler, Jodie Comer, and Michael Shannon. And unfortunately, after I finished watching the movie, I just found it kind of forgettable. Performance-wise, I think everyone did a good job in the movie, but I never really got invested in any of the characters. I thought Austin Butler and Jodie Comer's characters, Benny and Kathy, I think they didn't really have much depth as characters, and I found them both kind of boring in all honesty. Tom Hardy's character, Johnny, was someone who I was hoping we'd get more development from over the course of the movie. And I think we got some of it, but it didn't really seem to be enough in my opinion. And this is very much just a personal thing, but for the most part, I just didn't really find the plot all that interesting or fun to follow. I think the characters spent too much time just kind of hanging out at the bar or at rallies or around bonfires. There was also that whole storyline with that kid who was trying to join the Vandals and ended up becoming enemies with Johnny. I honestly wish that whole conflict was explored more and just fleshed out more. So yeah, overall, I think the movie was just lacking a stronger, more central narrative. And with that, it is my most disappointing movie of 2024. I don't think it's a bad movie by any means. I just found it underwhelming, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you on that one. Or I feel like this movie would have been better if it was like a 4 episode miniseries, gave it some more chance to breathe. But no, I completely agree with what you were saying on that one. Though for me, it could not be my most disappointing movie of the year because for me, the most disappointing movie of the year has to be something that I was truly hyped for or has to be a follow up to something I cared about deeply. And for me, there is no bigger example of that in 2024 than Joker Folie à Deux. Oh boy. So let's start with what I did like about this movie because I didn't out and out hate it. That's why it's not my worst movie of the year. For example, I love the opening scene with the old school Looney Tunes style animation recap of what happened in the first film. I thought that had way more character and production value put into it than it had any right to have. Joaquin Phoenix once again acts his ass off in this movie. I'm not a huge fan of his singing, but we'll get to that in a minute. And then I liked the romance and chemistry between Joker and Harley in this, but I don't think they actually did enough with it, weirdly enough. But again, that's what I did like about this movie. And again, the soundtrack is pretty good. But let's talk about what I didn't like. Number one, this movie is way too long and way too boring. Yes, the first Joker movie was 2 hours long, but it felt like stuff was always happening in it. And you also had the story of Arthur's descent into madness as kind of the driving force. This one, you're either in the asylum or you're in the courthouse, or you're back in the asylum and you're back in the courthouse. It gets very boring very quickly, and this movie moves at a snail's pace because you're only in those two locations. I find most of the actual like musical numbers terribly annoying. I feel like they just sort of come out of nowhere and then overstay their welcome. The only one I did like that I thought actually added to the movie was the scene in the courtroom where Arthur's hallucinating, going on a rampage with Harley, killing everybody in it. I'm like, oh, okay, this is starting to pick up finally. Oh, wait, this is all in Arthur's head. Ugh. And then let's see, it completely undoes everything from the first movie for no real reason. The entirety of the first movie was Arthur's descent into becoming the Joker. And then in this movie, they're like, oh, he's like, I'm not actually Joker. Okay, thanks for making the first movie completely pointless. And then let's talk about that complete and utter FU of an ending where, oh, it's revealed that a character who's not even named in this movie, I need to point out, kills Arthur and then you can see him painting the Joker smile on his face in the background. If they wanted to do that, which admittedly I don't hate the idea of Arthur not being the real Joker as we know the character, but they had a perfectly set up character to do that with. You had the younger inmate at Arkham Asylum who kind of looked up to Arthur as a mentor and loved everything he did as Joker. But this isn't even that character. Why? Why did they do any of this? Why did they do that? Why is this a musical? Why is it so long? Why is it so boring? And as somebody who absolutely loved the first movie, this was a slap in the face. But again, it's not my worst movie of the year because there was parts I did like about it. And we will get to why I hated the movie I hated the most this year in a couple of minutes. But yeah, so that's my award winner, in air quotes, for the Phantom Menace Award for 2024. All right, Cade. So would you like to bring this full circle and talk about your winner for the Cats 2019 award for the worst movie of the year 2024?
Absolutely. Andrew, real quick, before I talk about this movie, let me ask you this. Do you remember Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey?
How could I forget that utter pile of teeming dog shit?
Well, I'll tell you what, my least favorite movie of 2024 is going to be The Mousetrap. And believe it or not, I actually liked Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey better than this movie.
That is saying something.
Yeah, now I was fully aware of all the negativity surrounding this movie going into it, but I still checked it out with an open mind because I wanted to try to have fun with it at least. But unfortunately, after finishing the movie, it was just impossible. To me, there was just no real substance or plot to this movie. And I'm aware that a lot of slasher movies typically don't have much plot to them, but still, I'm a guy who likes to get at least some type of plot when I watch a movie, no matter what it is. And unfortunately, I didn't really get any of that. None of the characters in this movie are fun to follow. I honestly kept forgetting their names as I was watching it. And the thing is, this is another horror movie where the characters are just constantly making dumb decisions throughout most of the runtime. And it just makes me root for them even less. Honestly, you tend to root for the killer more if the characters just keep making all these decisions. And the killer of this movie, Tim Collins, who is under the control of the evil Mickey Mouse mask, he might actually be one of, if not the worst killer that I've ever seen in a slasher movie. And I'm not even exaggerating that. Not only did he not have the type of horror presence that you usually want to see from villains like this in the type of movies that these are, but he also has this random power where he teleports from time to time, which I just wasn't a fan of. It's just all these random moments where he teleports here and back, there and there, and over there and back there. And, I gotta tell you, speaking of random, there are also these really odd moments throughout the movie where it briefly cuts to black for no reason. It happens one time when the main character, Alex, blows out her birthday candles, and it doesn't really need to be there. I mean, I don't really know what else to say about this movie that hasn't already been said. And again, I'm not someone who likes to hate on lower budget films, but it was so impossible for me to get any amusement out of this movie. Again, I gave the movie a chance and I tried to have fun with it, but yeah, this is definitely my least favorite movie of 2024.
It sounds like it was definitely a worthy recipient because I know you're not the only person to out and out despise this movie, which is exactly why I didn't watch it. But there was a terrible movie that I did watch this year, and the second that I finished it, I knew that this was my front runner for the worst movie. I didn't know if it was going to stay there because I still had yet to see Craven the Hunter, but even Craven wasn't worth bad enough to knock this off the number one spot. My worst movie of 2024 is Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. Oh my dear Lord, what a terrible waste of 90 minutes. Okay, where do I begin with this pile of steaming donkey shit? Well, let's start off with the animation, which ranges from borderline unfinished in places, because there's parts where I swear to God characters key out, to out and out atrocious. For me, the absolute bottom of the barrel is the rattlesnakes that appear about a third of the way through the movie. Again, where they look out and out atrocious, and I swear some of them are actually like green screened out on occasion. It looks all the animation feels rushed and insanely cheap. Like even the animation that looks borderline, if you squint, maybe passable, still has that really cheap animation look to it. Okay, what else can I complain about with this terrible waste of time? Talk about the fact that it's not funny, like at all. This movie manages to somehow even make some of the classic SpongeBob running joke unfunny. For example, I lost count at 5 my leg jokes over the course of this movie, which is frankly way too many times, and thus kills the funny real quick. I don't remember laughing once over the course of this. Oh yeah, Wanda Sykes as the villain. Now, Wanda Sykes is a comedy legend, but my God, is she an awful villain in this? She has this weird mixture of simultaneously being incredibly bored in her performance and also chewing the scenery, which doesn't seem like it's possible, but if you've seen this movie, it's weirdly accurate. And then, oh yeah, let's talk about the scenes where somebody thought it'd be a great idea to take a fully, adult Wanda Sykes' head and badly Photoshop it onto a child's body, which is way more terrifying than it has any right to be. But the main reason why I hated this movie so much is the continued disrespect of Stephen Hillenburg's memory. The man who created SpongeBob SquarePants sadly passed away, and ever since he has passed away, Nickelodeon has seemingly made it its job to disrespect Mr. Hillenberg's memory. The man himself specifically didn't want any spin-offs for SpongeBob while he was alive. And the second he is no longer with us, Nickelodeon greenlights multiple spin-offs from this series. You got the Patrick Star Show, you got the terrible Camp Coral Show, but this is, in my opinion, the worst of the worst amongst them. And I know a direct to Netflix kids movie is probably way too low hanging fruit for this award. But my God, the disrespect of a great man's memory, and especially for something that was as near and dear to my childhood as SpongeBob SquarePants is, just makes me hate it that so much more than any other just generic slop that comes out direct to streaming. And it's because of that that this is my worst movie of 2024, because this movie made me out and out angry. I do believe that wraps up our 2024 awards, kid.
Yeah, it does. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will see you again later. And yeah, thank you guys so much for listening.